Tonight, the proposed salary hike would lift an MLA's pay to £67,000. With criticism of Stormont delivery and the fears of more big cuts to services on the way, I'll hear the arguments for and against the move live in the studio. Plus, is the DUP blocking the latest efforts to set a minimum price for alcohol? The Health Minister, Mike Nesbitt, suggests it is, but that wasn't always the case. We'll hear from a former DUP minister who wanted to see it introduced when he was in charge.
There is an irony. When I was first elected to Stormont in 1982, the DUP called alcohol the devil's buttermilk. Now it seems the DUP want to keep alcohol as cheap as possible in Northern Ireland.
Hello. Is it an indication of just how controversial the proposed Stormont salary increase is that none of the parties which support the pay review are prepared to join me in the studio tonight to explain their position? The almost 27% pay increase would take MLA's pay to £67,000 a year. Ministers would receive a boost to £105,000, and Michelle O'Neill and Emma Little-Pengelly would each receive almost £140,000. But are they all worth it? Two people who are prepared to debate the issue are the former DUP Special Advisor Tim Cairns and the People Before Profit MLA Gerry Carroll. Welcome to both of you, and thank you very much indeed for coming in to join us. Gerry Carroll, first of all, you've made it pretty clear today already that you're opposed to this salary increase, even though it would bring MLAs into line with their counterparts in Scotland and Wales. Why?
Well, Mark, I think it's obscene, no worker in retail and hospitality in the public sector is getting this scale of pay increase, and the simple point is, why should MLAs be on a pedestal? I don't think if you ask anybody outside this building, is Michelle O'Neill or Emma Little-Pengelly worth almost £140,000 a year salary? Most people would laugh at you and say, no, they're not. And I don't think the example with Wales and the North or Scotland here is comparable, because those legislators are making legislation, they're making laws, they're sitting for the most part all the last 10 years, where Stormont has been down for almost half that. So I don't think it's comparing like for like. But
if you listen to Alan Lowry, who chaired the Independent Remuneration Board, talking about this today, he said this is a corrective measure to deal with the fact that salaries didn't increase in the way that they should have done over the last 10 years.
But it's still higher than the increase in Wales and Scotland over the last 10 years. So
but it's still less than your counterparts there earn, even with this increase.
And the percentage is higher, but the point
but the actual amount, the salary that you're paid, will still end up being significantly less than members who are elected to serve in Edinburgh and Cardiff.
Yeah. The point I made is the executive isn't legislating, and it's interesting. I'm sure you invited other parties on the show, but they're not willing to explain their position.
We did. We invited them all on.
I'm sure you did, and that speaks volumes.
And they're not here. And I should just say, look, the main parties support the panel review, but of course we don't know if they support today's recommendations, and that's what we would like to have asked them tonight.
I know they do, because last year, almost the day last year, I proposed an amendment to this Remuneration Board bill to cap an increase. An increase couldn't be above CPI inflation. I think CPI rate of inflation is 4 or 5% in a minute. All executive parties voted against that. The SLP voted against that. And I warned, and I hate to be proven right on this point, that this will lead to a huge pay increase. It was dismissed by the Justice Minister as well and other people, and sadly been proven right. But I would encourage people, Mark, to have their say, to oppose this, to respond to the very, very short consultation period, I have to say, but to make their views heard. But it's quite telling that no other party is here tonight. I'm very happy, of course, to be here, but I think that speaks volumes.
Well, viewers will see that they're not here and draw their own conclusions. Tim Cairns, MLAs currently earn $53,000 a year. That'll rise by $14,000 if this proposal goes through to $67,000, as we were saying. The average wage in Northern Ireland's about $37,000. Do you reckon the new figure's about right?
It feels about right to me. Look, my view has always been
30,000 more than the average
well, yes.
wage?
Look, I mean, you've got to compare MLAs to what their standing is within the community. And I think MLAs are comparable to deputy heads of primary schools and secondary schools, and they start at £65,000 a year. So it feels just about right. That's what an MLA would be perceived within the community to be analogous to.
But maybe that would be right, Tim, just picking up on what Gerry Carroll said, if MLAs were actually legislating. But for, quite a few years in the last 10 years, they weren't actually sitting at Stormont. And even though they're sitting at the moment, there's not a lot of legislation being talked about. And already we're being told we're about to run out of time because it's only 15 months to the next election. I mean, when you were being paid, whatever it was, £80,000 as a special advisor 10 years ago, and MLAs were being paid a bit less than what they're being paid at the moment, they were legislating, presumably. And Jerry's point is they're not at the minute.
But MLAs don't just legislate. MLAs have to carry a wealth of legal knowledge to be able to represent constituents. They function as kind of pseudo-solicitors.
Well, so do councillors, and they get paid 18,000 a year.
Yes, but that's not a full-time job. An MLA job is a full-time job.
Councillors have to deal with planning.
Part of that is clearly legislating on a Monday and Tuesday, but part of that is giving advice. Part of that is leading in the community. Part of that is making sure that your constituents are well served with their problems, and it is a difficult job. I think we do ridicule politicians all the time, but politicians do a job that is very hard. It's much harder than people can imagine, and you give up a lot to be a politician. It's not easy to go around the
Jerry
supermarket.
Carroll's point is you're paid a lot.
It's not easy. Well, it's not easy to go into pubs and restaurants. You get challenged, and many MLAs have to, just withdraw from public life because they have to give up so much. It is a difficult job. It's a job that's recognised in the community, and if we want good politicians,
you don't think you're slightly over-egging the bit, and they have to give up a lot. They can't go into pubs and restaurants. Of course, they can go into pubs and restaurants.
Maybe not after the rate stuff a few weeks ago.
I can tell you, there are many people who are MLAs who just withdraw from public life because it's difficult to even go and do shopping and those sorts of things. But look, that's a side issue. The issue is they are community leaders. They do a difficult job. They represent their constituents, and they do a job that's analogous to a deputy head of a school. That's analogous to a community solicitor. That's the job that they do, and they should be paid something the equivalent of that. And I think this review's got it just about right.
Community solicitors are paid an awful lot more than £67,000.
Well, are they? Well, they're paid about that, I think, Mark. I think there'll be solicitors at home they'll be shocked that you think they get paid more than £67,000. That's about what a community solicitor gets, and that's what an MLA is.
So, Jerry Carroll, you used to be a councillor in Belfast City Council. You're now an MLA. Do you think that a £50,000 pay gap is about right?
For councillors as opposed to
MLAs, yeah. I mean, you know the workload of both.
Yeah,
there's the pay gap. Do you think that's about right, or do you think councillors should be paid more? Or
it's a good question, I suppose. It depends what people are doing. When I was a councillor at the time.
I think a lot of people watching this programme will be wondering, what are people doing?
No, exactly. Well, the point I was trying to make is whether councillors are working part-time as well, or they're working full-time, as quite a lot of councillors are.
Yeah. Some of them are working, of course, in the offices of MLAs.
Some are indeed, and obviously if you're talking about...
So they've been paid twice?
Yeah, and if you're talking about paying them people more, then obviously it would be, 50, 60 or maybe more £1,000, which obviously is crazy money. And the point is, Mark, this is about politicians should be on a wage similar to the people they represent. They're higher already. They take just over £52,000 a year. This will take them into a high bracket, and for the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, into the stratosphere with a huge salary, and they should be on a wage which is reflective of the people they represent, because I don't think, and most people don't think, they could truly represent people, understand the needs and the pressures of real life if they're on a wage that's 3 or 4 times that of the people that they're representing.
So do you think the optics are particularly bad, given the conversations that we keep having week after week on programmes like this about the cuts that are coming down the tracks in terms of public services, and the fact that Stormont isn't doing the job that MLAs were elected to do, and that is to legislate?
Absolutely, the optics are terrible, and obviously I think whilst there's much being made about the independence, and I'm not challenging the independence of the chair of the board, but the political ground, if you will, for this was set out by politicians last year. In the original bill, it mentioned about must give due regard to Scotland, Wales and the Dáil. It was passed by MLAs. I proposed to remove that. I proposed to actually amend it to include the limit to the increase to CPI. They all voted against it because I'm surmising, if you will, there was probably backroom conversation, winks and nods to go we'll get this through and we'll get what we want. So I think they made a bit of more than they could chew on this. Okay, well, who knows what kind of backroom conversations there might or might not have been. But what do you do if constituents come up to you in your constituency in West Belfast and say, this is indefensible, how could you possibly take that increase? Because the point of the matter is, you'll have no choice. If this or something like this is the final determination of the Remuneration Board,
sorry, but your salary's going to go up by that amount.
Well, two things. First of all, I encourage people to submit to the consultation process and they make clear, and I hope that that's listened to. I mean, the original ad hoc committee, they did a call for evidence. 70% of the people say they're opposed to the increase of a scale to this. So I encourage people to submit to the consultation. But my salary will stay the same. I don't take the full salary as it is. My salary is in line with the average in my constituency, and I'll stay that way.
OK. Do you accept the optics are bad, Tim Cairns? I mean, the TUV's Timothy Gaston says this is exactly the outcome MLAs always intended, which is what Jerry Carroll's just suggested, and it looks like they're feathering their own nest. And Liam Kelly of the Police Federation has criticised it as a staggering own goal and a slap in the face for struggling public sector workers. Can you see where they're coming from?
Absolutely. Of course, this isn't popular. I mean, this is going to be, you talk about MLAs pay, MPs pay, it's one of the most unpopular things to talk about. But one thing I would say where I actually disagree with this determination is on what happens if the Assembly is suspended. They're talking about a 10% cut and then gradual cuts over time. If the Assembly is suspended, half the job can't be done. The salary should be cut by 50% immediately that the Assembly is suspended.
So you think this recommendation is far too soft
and I think
in
it's
that regard?
Soft in that regard. I think it's got it about right when the Assembly's sitting and it's functioning and MLAs are doing what they should be doing on a daily basis, both in and outside the Assembly. But I think they've got it wrong and they've got the tone wrong for whenever the Assembly's suspended.
Yeah, although, I mean, just to be absolutely clear, that 10% cut happens again and again and again
but it should
as
happen
time
immediately.
passes.
I'm saying they've got it wrong. 50%, the second it comes down, it should be cut because half the job isn't being done. The stuff inside the Assembly isn't being done. You should only get paid for what you do outside.
And you've made the point in the past, haven't you, in conversations like this, that you think MLAs deserve to be paid well, better than they're currently paid, to attract a better standard of political representative, whatever that means. Is there any hard evidence for that, in fact?
Well, if we don't increase pay, we're not going to get better politicians. There's no
we're just going to get the
that.
politicians we get, are we not?
Well, why would someone, if we want someone who's a deputy head of a school, if we want someone who's a director of policy of a charity, if we want someone who's in a professional job to move into the political realm, to be able to give that public service in the political realm, then we need to pay them.
Yes, no, but that's a fair point.
Pay cut
except for the fact that when we constantly hear a narrative from the Assembly about just how difficult it is to make a four-party coalition work, why would anybody want to go into politics at Stormont, no matter what they were being paid?
People want to serve, and I think people.
Some people want to serve.
Well, I think, Mark, most people, in fact, all politicians that I have met, and I've met pretty much all of our MLAs, and I have not met one who does not have public service at their heart.
But they also want to deliver, and at the minute, it looks like they can't deliver. That's the point.
Well, look, that's part of the job in Northern Ireland. That's part of navigating the Assembly structures, and I've been, a vocal advocate that we need to change that. It's not working. It's broken. It needs to change. We need to have a constitutional convention to get a system and a structure that works. There's no doubt about that. We're going to be in perpetual stalemate unless we get to a more mature democracy. Now, we need to get people who are going to go in there and negotiate on that constitutional convention, so we need to pay people to be our politicians, to represent us and represent us well. Look, I think politicians do a hard job and they're easy to knock, and I think they deserve to be paid what is fair remuneration against the rest of the community, and I think this is about right.
You and Timothy Gaston, I imagine, agree on very little, but you do seem to be singing off the same song sheet as far as many aspects of this are concerned. You're being paid $53,000 a year. You reckon $37,000 is better. The proposal is to go to $67,000. You and Timothy Gaston, and not too many more, a very small voice up at Stormont at the moment.
Maybe, but I mean, it shows you how much there's agreement amongst all the executive parties and the SDLP on this.
Although they're not prepared to come in to defend it in public.
They're not indeed. I am. And I think that speaks volumes, that they know this is unpopular. They'll try to say, no doubt in the coming days, this is an independent process. We didn't do it, but they signed off to allow this to happen effectively, and they were called out. I called them out last year that this would happen. They tried to deny it, tried to duck and weave, Mark. And this is the result of it. So if they come out in the morning, if they all come out in the morning and said, this is too high, this is too much, I would imagine that the chair would take that on board and I would maybe put it back, but we'll wait and see whether they do.
Well, certainly some of the parties have said that they're prepared to engage with this process and they will see where that leads them. So they're not immediately signing up up to saying that they agree with this. They agree with the establishment of the board, but we'll see what clarifications we get over the next 24 or 48 hours. A politician in front of a camera or microphone would be a good start. Okay, listen, thanks both very much indeed for now. We'll leave it there, and we'll hear again from you both a little bit later in the programme. But let's turn now to an issue that's been debated and discussed for more than a decade: minimum unit pricing for alcohol. It was first proposed by a DUP health minister back in 2012, but now the party is being blamed for holding up the move. Well, the chief medical officer says it's irrefutable that it would save lives. The DUP now says there's not enough evidence to adopt the proposals. Here's Darren Marshall.
Minimum unit pricing is a policy that sets a legal limit at which alcohol cannot be sold below. It's aimed not at pubs and restaurants, but at the cheap alcohol available in supermarkets and off licences. So what would that look like on the shelves and at the tills? Well, this 2.5 litre bottle of cider currently retails at $5.99, but under minimum unit pricing, the cost would more than double, and it couldn't be sold for any less than £12.20. A 1 litre bottle of vodka like this, which you can buy for about £18.50, would increase by £6 to more than £24. And £10 can currently get you 18 cans of beer. But if this policy was implemented, that tenner would only stretch to 10 cans. Minimum unit pricing was first discussed here back in 2012. Back then, the DUP Health Minister, Edwin Poots, wanted to see the measure in place by 2013. Since then, there have been more than 3,700 alcohol-related deaths recorded in Northern Ireland. Now, no one is claiming that this measure would have saved all of those lives, but might it have made a difference?
If we look at the evidence from Scotland, introduced in 2018, they've seen a 3% drop in consumption. The vast majority of that in problem drinkers. They've seen a 4% reduction in admissions to hospital and a 13% reduction in death. So that's 120 fewer people that are dying each year in Scotland as a consequence of the introduction of minimum unit pricing. Now, you can do the sums for yourself in terms of what that might have equated to had we been able to progress the legislation back in 2012.
So what do you say to those people who say the evidence is limited?
The evidence is clear that this is a targeted, proven intervention that will reduce the harms from alcohol, will reduce admissions and costs to the health service. I think that is evidence which should inform and guide policy decisions, but I actually think we have a moral imperative to do the right thing here, and that is to take forward this legislation.
What's the biggest myth or misconception you've heard about minimum unit pricing?
That it's a tax on the poor, and it's not. This is basically an intervention was specifically targeted to assist individuals who are drinking at problem levels. The evidence also clearly demonstrates that it will prevent people increasing their alcohol consumption to problem levels, and there's good evidence now emerging that it will have a positive impact on young people, delaying their onset of consuming alcohol and delaying their increase in alcohol consumption.
The Chief Medical Officer, though, can only advise. It's ultimately a decision for Stormont ministers.
There's no agreement yet. I need the executive to say we will support minimum unit pricing for alcohol, and we have yet to have a substantive discussion on that issue.
3 of the 4 parties at the executive have openly supported minimum unit pricing. You're the Ulster Unionist representative. Alliance supported, Sinn Féin supported. Is it the DUP that's blocking this?
Well, the logic would suggest that is the case, and I can tell you without breaching the confidence of discussions at the executive level that I have spoken to senior members of the DUP and they are against minimum unit pricing. I'm not entirely sure why, but they are against.
What reasons have they given you?
I was told by one senior member of the DUP that it would force the price of premium brands to go up to maintain that distinction from own label brands. I'm not sure there's any evidence that has happened elsewhere where minimum unit pricing already exists.
You're the 5th health minister to try and progress this measure. Edwin Poots in 2012, Jim Wells, Michelle O'Neill, Robin Swan, and now you. Are you the one that's going to deliver it, or are you going to join that list of ministers that have failed to deliver it?
Well, we will know fairly soon, because I think time is running out quite rapidly to get this over the line during the course of this mandate. But these things take time, and the legislative programme is now very tight for the rest of the mandate, so we would need to move at real pace.
The DUP say there's a limited evidential basis for the current proposals and they'll continue to engage with the Health Minister. But this is a policy once championed by 2 DUP health ministers, including this one 10 years ago.
There are people in their graves today who wouldn't be there had there been an upping of the price of cheap alcohol.
Presumably that follows then there will be people in their graves within the next 12 months if Mike Nesbitt isn't able to introduce this.
Yes, and Mike Nesbitt's absolutely right, even though he would have been a political opponent. He's absolutely right to introduce this because the evidence is overwhelming. This will save lives.
Was it DUP party policy to introduce this back in 2012, when you were there in 2015? Because it appears it's the DUP that are holding this up now in 2026.
There is an irony. When I was first elected to Stormont in 1982, the DUP called alcohol the devil's buttermilk. Now it seems the DUP want to keep alcohol as cheap as possible in Northern Ireland, and that's a complete change in attitude.
Is it an abdication of responsibility or a dereliction of duty if this executive in 2026 doesn't deliver this?
Absolutely, because Scotland have done it, Wales have done it, the Irish Republic have done it. Why are Northern Ireland lives less important than those in the rest of the UK and in the Irish Republic?
Jim Wells ending that report by Darren Marshall. I'm joined now by Dr. Joy Watson from the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Northern Ireland, who specialises in treating people with addictions, and Tim Cairns and Jerry Carroll are still here too. So welcome to you, Joy Watson. Thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. The CMO and the Minister are very clear that the evidence is there to support the case for minimum unit pricing, and they say it could save lives. And you agree?
I definitely do, yeah. I mean, minimum unit price has been implemented elsewhere, as we know, including in Scotland, and deaths have reduced by 13%. And I suppose, you know, what strikes me is if in the headlines we heard that a 13% reduction in another physical health condition was possible, I think that we would be very keen to see that brought forward. You know, so I think we need to see alcohol dependence as very similar to other health conditions and act on this if it's going to be 13% less deaths seen as a result.
3 of the 4 executive parties want to see this moving forward. It seems that the DUP is not keen on that happening at this stage. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But you are one of those who signed a letter from the lobby group Alcohol Health Alliance UK to the First and Deputy First Ministers today, calling on them to support this change. Have you got an idea in your head as to what kind of response you're hoping to get from them, given that they apparently have very different views on the subject?
Well, we hope that we can get it over the line because most of the parties are in support. And I hope that the statistics that have been released on the 11th of February this month will really shine a light on the need for this, because we've seen that our deaths have risen to 80% higher than they were 10 years ago. So we're seeing that really very clear evidence of harm related to alcohol. I don't know how we can delay any longer on a policy that we know will reduce that harm.
Mike Nesbitt said a little bit about why he thinks the DUP is holding up these proposals for a change in the law. I know you've had some engagement with politicians and you have talked to representatives of the DUP. Can you flesh out any detail on why the DUP is opposed to this move?
Well, I suppose I'm here to talk about health and not politics. I have
it's a politics programme,
yes,
as you know.
I am here to talk about the health aspect, but I have met with the DUP, and the issues that they raised with me about it were, first of all, that it was maybe penalising people in poorer situations, and secondly, that perhaps the cost of alcohol might increase across the board. But in my opinion, and as proven elsewhere, those things are not the case. The cost. And
have you got evidence that you can point to try to persuade those people who are not yet convinced that they're wrong?
Well, I presented that evidence. However, I think sometimes whenever someone wants to find a problem, that they will question the evidence. But I don't feel that the evidence is questionable, because it has robustly been studied, it has robustly been peer-reviewed. There isn't really any chink in the evidence. But yet the DUP's
position seems to be that the evidence isn't there. So is that because it simply doesn't want to accept the evidence, or it doesn't understand the evidence?
Possibly a mixture of both. but I don't believe that the evidence isn't there.
You are absolutely clear in your mind that the evidence is there.
Absolutely.
And that introducing a minimum price here would make a real difference to problem drinkers, and it would not, and this is the thing, it would not just unfairly target less well-off people who enjoy a drink.
Yes, it would absolutely not affect the price of moderate drinkers' alcohol. It would not affect the price of the vast majority of alcohol, but what it would impact is the cheap, high-volume, toxic alcohol that currently you can buy for cheaper than a coffee in, you know, a coffee shop.
And that is quite deliberately what you would want to do. There's no, I mean, the Chief Medical Officer made that very clear. This is about a targeted intervention to make that alcohol at the cheaper end more expensive for people who are problem drinkers.
Yes, it's absolutely targeted at that specific alcohol, because alcohol-related deaths in Northern Ireland are highly associated with lower socioeconomic communities. And it is in those areas that that high volume alcohol that is cheap is consumed. In other words, the high volume alcohol that is cheap is causing deaths.
Can I just ask you, before I bring in our other two guests for their perspectives on this, and interestingly, as I think you know, they don't entirely agree with your position on this, so we'll see what kind of exchange of views we have in a moment or two. In terms of other societal costs, visits to EDs, deaths from cancer, abuse within the home, what evidence can you point to that backs up your suggestion that things as they currently stand are problematic and need to be and can be fixed by this move?
Yes, as you say, so it's not just deaths.
Yeah.
It is actually a wider problem. 900 million per year goes in Northern Ireland to sorting out the consequences of alcohol, whether that be any of those things that you've just mentioned, including the criminal justice system, you know, obviously our health service, but lots of things that are issues in relation to alcohol.
But you're not suggesting that this would be a panacea for all of those issues, that all of a sudden if we adopted minimum unit pricing, we wouldn't be spending £900 million on alcohol-related difficulties in Northern Ireland?
Right. It is not the silver bullet.
And you couldn't put a figure on what that would save, presumably?
Well, in terms of hospital admissions, the modelling that was done would say that, for example, 2 million a year could be saved alone in just hospital admissions. So that's an example. But, you know, and that's only if the unit price would be about 50p. If it was 65p like Scotland, it would probably be even more than that.
OK.
So yes, there would be definite savings.
Right, let's bring Jerry Carroll in. You're the only elected representative at the table on this subject as well tonight, because I should say we did invite the DUP to join us to discuss this issue, and the party declined that invitation. And we're still not entirely clear what its opposition is to this issue. Maybe we'll find out in due course. What do you make of the proposals?
Well, thanks, Joy, for outlining some of that. I haven't read the papers that you're referring to, but I think it's sort of well-meaning, but I think it might be misguided because I haven't seen the data, and I'd be concerned that this is another way to kind of not deal with the systemic and real problems of alcoholism and addiction which are in our societies. And obviously, I think going by what Joy said and what I understand the proposal to be, it's not going to target people who are middle class and getting maybe the middle price bottles in the middle of the aisle, and it's going to target, you know, people who obviously need help with their addictions, but will probably just be buying the higher brands, so their addiction won't be tackled, won't be addressed. They'll just be buying more, maybe.
The first thing is to say that you're talking here to a health professional who is an acknowledged expert in the area of addiction. So, you know, we've all got to concede that fact that this is the expert sitting here tonight giving us the information, and she's written the papers, not just a question of not having read the papers. But this is not just about what impact it could have on alcoholics. It's also about getting to people before their heavy drinking becomes really seriously problematic.
Well, exactly, that needs to happen, but I think the best way is to deal with the issues, and the issues are, and you mentioned it, Joy, obviously, deprivation, poverty, all these issues societal that people are obviously self-medicating, and you've probably seen more than any people.
You can do more than one thing at the same time.
Indeed you can, but I just don't remain unconvinced that it's the correct measure to deal with a real problem in our society.
But if it reduces 13% of deaths, if it helps less people die, do you not think it's worthwhile? If it's that's quite a significant number, 13% less. Because
it's the Scottish figure, isn't it? Yeah. But like, you know, is other deaths from other addictive substances in Scotland? Because, you know, talk to people when you go to Glasgow or go there.
Yeah, but we're talking about alcohol-related deaths, which are at an all-time high in Northern Ireland. and Scotland would, we're superseding Scotland, we're top of the charts. So if they've demonstrated since introducing minimum unit price a 13% reduction in people dying,
would you say to yourself,
is it not worth increasing the price? Even though people may be addicted to this stuff, and you're saying you want to be kinder to people that don't have to pay as much money for alcohol, but actually this is dangerous stuff because people get highly addicted to it. And even if you spoke to patients who have been through this, they would say, I really wish that stuff was never available to me because I wouldn't have went down that slippery slope.
And you've done the research, right? So I'm asking you. Obviously you talked about them kind of not banning the sort of the cheaper products. But how will this prevent them? People maybe just be driven to ban the more expensive or slightly more expensive products. So how does it actually deal with the addiction that people have?
Because they will drink less, but you're absolutely right. This is part of a wider strategy, and people need to be aware of treatment services. There needs to be more education. It's a wider strategy. This is only part of it. It's an essential part of it, but people need to be aware that they can come for treatment. They can get their alcohol treated, but I do think they would drink less if it was more expensive. And also have
a concern that this is going to increase the profits of supermarkets. Big supermarkets and big sort of drinks companies could obviously target the more sort of cheaper elements that are going to potentially make a huge profit off this rather than actually invest in the services, which are more expensive but more important than actually.
Well, presumably they wouldn't be making a lot more money because they might be selling the product at a higher price, but the theory is they'd be selling less of it. I mean, this is about your and I understand that, in good faith, you're saying you want to speak up for the people that you represent, but if this substance, cheap alcohol, is doing real damage, evidentially doing real damage to the people you represent, would backing this change not actually help the people you represent? I mean, arguably, by not supporting it, you're not helping them. In fact, you're doing the opposite of that.
No, I disagree. I think it's more complex than this. I think it's dealing with issues of why people are addicted to alcohol. It's to do with poverty, deprivation, alienation, troubles, all these things. And I think just putting the increase on the cost of sort of cheaper alcohol, I remain unconvinced that it deals with all the issues. And in fairness, you say it doesn't deal with all the issues, but I know Scotland
definitely helps.
Is a model. But
yeah.
Well, let me bring Tim in at this point. I just want to. The Chief Medical Officer spoke to the Health Committee at the end of January, and he obviously spoke to Darren Marshall in that interview. Look, he says very, very clearly on the issue that these two have just been talking about, if we look at the evidence from Scotland, and Joy's just referenced it there, introduced in 2018, the CMO says they've seen a reduction of 13% in deaths. That's 120 fewer people that are dying each year in Scotland as a consequence of the introduction of this price move. So he is certain it would save lives here too. He can't say how many exactly, but he has no doubt that if that happens in Northern Ireland, it'll be good news for people and fewer people are going to be dying. Jim Wells backs that up as well.
Yeah, but I think we've got to maybe break this down. I think it is a little more complex than just bring in minimum unit alcohol pricing and deaths reduced. Correlation is not always causation. I think Joy has said at that middle price level of alcohol, there's not going to be a change in price. So why is it that people's behaviour changes if price hasn't changed? So clearly the evidence must be education has changed their activity and changed their practices and habits. So what I think the public policy problem with this is that Jerry's articulating is we're going to tax the poor. And I'm not saying that this is what the policy is, but this is the public policy problem. We're going to tax the poor to educate the rich. So if the rich are not affected in any way by this, their alcohol is exactly the same price, but it is those more toxic drinks that maybe people on lower incomes would consume. They're going to be taxed and pay a higher price so that people in middle incomes are not affected at all, but their consumption lowers. So I think that's the public policy problem. Are we simply going to tax the poor to educate the rich now? I think that's what we need to get round, and that's what we need to solve. And make sure that that's not what's happening.
Okay, so it's an interesting point that you make. I'm sure Joy would want to respond to that.
You used the word toxic, and I think that's it. It's toxic. It's a poison. And at that level of alcohol, it's causing harm. So you're not taxing, you're not penalising people, you're protecting their health. It's a public health strategy. Smoking You know, cigarettes increased the price, education around it, it did work.
But if education works, so we know it works, those who are more wealthy are not affected. They pay exactly the same. It's education that changes their habits. So what we need to do then, maybe, is educate people who are on lower incomes. So what we're really doing here is shifting the problem to lower incomes just to educate the rich. And I think that's where the
particular problem is. That's where the biggest problem is.
Yes, I'm just articulating the public policy quandary.
The lower socioeconomic groups in the most deprived communities are 4 times more likely to die of an alcohol-related illness. So they need protected.
I'm not challenging the evidence. I'm just putting the public policy quandary that you have to win your argument. But I don't think that the need for the wider strategy should stop us from implementing this, because we know the wider strategy is needed of education and everything else. But this has proven to actually work.
Okay.
I think it's the poverty and deprivation that's driving people to drink and kill them.
And I think Jerry's absolutely right. It's not dealing with the systemic problem that's creating this difficulty around the substance. We're not dealing with poverty in our society here. What we're actually doing is shifting the problem to somewhere else.
Okay.
Now, and that's maybe why we're seeing better results.
I want to ask you about another issue. And again, we don't have a representative of the DUP here tonight, because if we did, I could ask this question and maybe get some clarity. Chief Medical Officer appeared at the Health Committee at the end of January, and there were 2 members of the party who were sitting in that committee, Diane Dodds and Alan Robinson, and they didn't ask a single question all the time that the Chief Medical Officer and a senior member from the Department of Health staff were there to answer questions. And today the DUP issues a statement to Darren Marshall on our team saying, we don't support this move because there's a lack of evidence. There was an opportunity for 2 MLAs, 2 highly paid MLAs, to sit across the table from the Chief Medical Officer and ask questions and get the evidence. They didn't do it.
Well, look, going back to 2012, Jim Wells is talking about in your package, there has been a dichotomy in the DUP between people who would want to take a public health approach and who would back Joy fully, and those people who would be a more libertarian view. And we've seen that around vaccines with some members of the DUP. It's give all of the information, and then people can make their own minds up as to whether they want to have these medical interventions or not. And I do think we're seeing that played out again within the party. There are potentially some people who have that public health approach and some people who have that libertarian approach.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point that you make, but it's not quite the question I asked you, because in the earlier part of this discussion, in the earlier part of this programme, you were telling me MLAs deserve a 27% pay rise because they're all experts in legal issues and they have very difficult issues to deal with. And here's an example of a complex policy issue that they could have tried to get to grips with in that committee meeting, and they didn't ask any questions.
Mark, I can do many things, but I cannot channel Alan Robinson or Diane Dodds.
It's a reasonable question to ask.
If I did, we've got a psychiatrist here who would condemn me.
Well, look, we'll leave that hanging in the air. We can't answer it, along with a lot of other issues as well. It's a very interesting point, and we'll see where it goes from here. Thanks all very much indeed for coming in to join us. That's it for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at 10 o'clock on BBC One and iPlayer. And if you're interested in joining up the dots on the state of Northern Ireland's public finances, have a listen to our latest Red Lines conversation. You'll find it on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Good night.